This one over here is Bill Forkinson stuff out of his More Milk from Kikuyu. One of the best 2 pieces of paper I've ever read in my life. So basically all it's saying is we've got our 4.5 leaf stages here, okay, running up and down here. And all it's sitting there and telling us is that our leaf starts to decline, so the percentage of leaf as a plant. Our stem starts to grow more, and as we see, once we get past that 4.5 leaf, we're starting to get a lot of stem. Once we get past that 4.5, 5 leaf, we're starting to get a lot of dead material, okay? So we've grown it, it's dying, it's senescing, no point having it. What we see up here is our protein and megajoules of energy. So megajoules of energy is what we want. That's what we're going to use to convert the energy into something. Protein's really important to get the balance. But as we can see, once we get past that 4.5 leaf stage, it starts to drop off a lot. Okay, so if we look at 4.5 leaf stage, we can still have 10 ME. Kikuyu, good quality stuff. You'll fatten animals. You will put milk in the vat. Once we start getting to 5, 6, it's starting to drop down to 8. Well, that's 20% less. It might only say 2 ME, but that means 20% of the feed, they've got to eat more to try and get in and get the same product. Okay, typically as well, because we're getting the stem and the dead material, you're getting lower quality, you're getting higher fibre, so it takes longer for them to ruminate it. Okay, so they actually intake is less. Right, so they eat less. What they eat less of is less quality, right, and we just can't get the production going. This is Peter Bill's work up at Taree, so he's been doing a lot of nitrogen work in Kikuyu. I know when I first started coming from, I used to work out west and then come to the coast about 2012, 2013. A lot of farmers used to tell me, you know, you never put nitrogen on Kikuyu because it'll affect your ryegrass from being able to establish. The Kikuyu will overtake your ryegrass. So basically from February onwards, don't use fertiliser on kike because you won't get a ryegrass establishment. And I was like, righto, yep, okay. So Pete's been doing this work. So this is the quality question, okay, and yield. So from 0 N to 60 kilos of N, okay, we've got an increase of 1,200 to, so there's 1,700?
700 units and then double
So
basically
12,
60.
22. So you've got about 1,100 kilos of dry matter growth extra, okay, on 60 units. So you could calculate that out and say, what's that cost me? Because this is what Richard Eckhart talks about. You've got to cost your nitrogen out as a feed source. So you'd actually sit there and say, let's say it was 1,000, let's say it was 60 units, let's say it was $1.50, let's say it was $80, and you got a tonne, it's $80 a tonne of feed. Right, just as rough numbers. Then we look at the quality. So he's got about half an ME better off. Okay, so half a megajoule. Again, doesn't sound like much. What's half a megajoule on 9? It's just over 5%, yeah? Yep, so it's just over 5% better quality in ME. And you got a bit better protein. One thing Pete did mention is he reckons, because when he was cutting and weighing this, he was taking all the stems. Okay, so the quality wasn't quite showing up as much. He said if you had just taken the leaf like the cows would, like we were saying before, he reckons that, you know, that quality difference would be more. But let's just work on those numbers, and you're talking about half an ME.
That's exactly right. In a silage or haymaking situation, you are taking the whole plant. So
Yep. Yeah. If you're taking it as a silage cut, that's exactly what you'll get.
When he was getting his 2,353.
Yep, here.
What was he finding on his farm? I mean, that's a huge amount of feed to manage that quality.
Oh, not if you haven't got feed.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Like that wasn't this year. This was
Oh, okay.
17 or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that's just a huge amount of, I'm just sort of thinking,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you manage, you know, it's just
Again, if you don't need the feed.
Roll back the clock 12 months from today, and if you could produce another 1,000 kilos of dry matter from $80 worth of fertiliser, it was a no-brainer. This year, we're probably not any of us are thinking about that, but
Treat it as a feed source.
yeah, I guess that's what that's trying to show. And on the flip side, if you know, and we spoke about this yesterday, you know, you got blokes that are going out there and people going out trying to buy the neighbour's property or something like that, you know, to have more land.
They want more land, they want more
Yet, if we think about our management, why don't we just get better at what we do on the home farm and go, well, through a management process, you can produce more feed if needed and increase your carrying capacity that way. So without going and spending $1 million buying the next door neighbour just to have more land. So it's a concept, I guess, of what we're...
So going back to Bryson's question on those numbers, can we just have a recap? What I'm actually is how I'm just trying to get this grazing management and this quality issue.
Yep.
And we've still got the same number of cows, and we're basically making a decision whether we put nitrogen on now because is it going to impact on quality.
Yep.
What I'm looking at there is I'm not, from a quality point of view, it's not worth it.
Yes, and the good thing to say here is that you've got to have, like this is just one trial and you don't even know if we had a nitrogen deficiency. Obviously we got a response, but how deficient was it as well? Okay, I'll probably show you on, do you want to scoot to that photo? So this, I don't know if this will help, but this is more of a conceptual look at it rather than the science. So this, don't worry about that, that's grazing management stuff. These three photos here, very hard to see that photo, I'm sorry, but basically what you're seeing there is you got your normal Kikuyu growth, right, with no end, and then we've got a big urine stain, okay? And everyone's hopefully been through this and probably don't have time to go through it, but we're actually seeing a massive difference in colour and urine stain, so indication of nitrogen deficiency, okay? So what we're talking about here on a dairy farm, okay, where we're chasing quality feed, okay, and we have all that stuff about heat stress. Just keep that in your mind. Those cows are going out for 2 hours to eat, and we need them to eat as much as they can of quality feed, okay? So this here is one handful of feed in between the clumps, right? And this is one handful of feed where nitrogen was available from the urine, okay? So I know when I went to uni or an ag college, I don't know if they're still teaching this, but cows can only take so many bites at a time, okay? And if they're going out for 2 hours to take so many bites, I want them to have as many bites of that, okay? So then they go sit down and they can ruminate and make some production, rather than so many bites of that as such, is the point of that nitrogen. So it's not just nitrogen in quality, which if it gets real bad, that's not real bad. That would still be, if I was to have a guess at it, I'd say this is 11 ME, 20% protein. That'd be 10 ME because it's got a good rotation length, so the quality's there right that way. It's probably back a bit. If let's say it's half ME back, but the protein would be back 5 as well. It might be 15. Once it starts going really pale yellow, it might be down to 12, 13. All right, so it's starting to get really low protein. So then you've got to start adding it into the bale and everything else.
Coming back to your question, Julia, and again, it just comes back down to that management. If you know you've got too much feed, which is probably the answer, and what we said about before, and keep that in the back of your mind, is the 1,200 kilos is the total amount really they're ever going to get out of a paddock. Instead of keeping them in there to try and get it down now, move them on, get your rotation quicker, get them around, scoot them around, taking out the leaf which has the quality, get Chris in there with the mulch mower and just go mulching. That's the answer. You know, like there's no point putting, especially your young stock that you're finishing. Cows, probably a slightly different story, but for you with your young stock, keep them moving, you know, and keep that mulcher coming around at this time of the year. And that's, you know, we're 6 to 8 weeks realistically, well, let's say 4 to 8 weeks away from starting to sow. If you can start the mulching now, I know everyone's going to be happy with the drill seeder going through it now, rather than, you know, if we don't start mulching. So it's just about setting up for that situation. Yep.
So this one Pete was just putting up just to showcase exactly what we've been talking about. You know, when I showed those graphs of the ME dropping off, the protein dropping off, this is just a different version of it. You know, if we've got vegetative Kikuyu feed, you know, 4 to 5 leaves, okay. We've got 9 to 10 ME. Well fertilised stuff gets above that. Good protein. What do our cows want? Protein-wise? I don't make any stuff up, and I haven't invented anything yet, but what I get told is about 17% protein and potential yield. And then once you start getting down to late vegetative, you're starting to miss the boat. 6 to 8 megajoules, like you're starting to just keep a cow alive. They're not going to actually produce on it, okay? They can't physically eat enough of it to do anything. And then add in, we have some hot days and heat stress, right? They'll possibly go backwards. Low protein, so now we need to add something into the bale and feed something else to get the protein up in the diet. And massive yield, but you could have grazed that twice and get the same yield. Right, so this is Pete's work that he's done with the ryegrass. So this is what we were talking about before, about what's the success of ryegrass if we don't use N on our kike or if we don't use nitrogen at sowing, okay? So this is, I don't know what it says on, but that's meant to be no. So these fellas here had zero nitrogen. There you go. Zero nitrogen. 150 nitrogen, 300 kilos of nitrogen, okay, over the season. And the key with this is that to show that the residual nitrogen is actually kept in, and then we've actually applied nitrogen a week after sowing of ryegrass, okay? So that was zero nitrogen a week after, 50 kilos of nitrogen, 100 kilos of nitrogen a week after, and so on and so on. Okay, so we're definitely getting a response by adding the nitrogen, okay? However, here, we probably haven't got as big a response as these fellas, because we've got some residual N possibly from here that's carrying across to the ryegrass, okay, and allowing it to get up. Does that make sense? So here we're getting a good response because we've got no N, and then if we add N and we've got a response. Same with 150, the kike probably used all that. There's none left. So we've got a good response with the ryegrass, okay? And then this fellow here was sitting there going, well, 300. When we've added more N, we haven't really got much more growth in our ryegrass. But we've still got good growth because we've got some residual N left. These are just some quick photos. That'd be a high N part up there, nitrogen, and that was no nitrogen, and that's ryegrass sown into it. Righto, so yep. Just with the nitrogen thing, and this is what we sort of started talking about when we started thinking about this, is that if we've got a Kikuyu plant, okay, all up here, beautiful, growing, and then we have this poor little ryegrass plant and has a small amount of root like that, and these Kikuyu plants are going to go down 2 or 3 metres, okay, and we apply a little bit of nitrogen to try and get establishment, okay, what we couldn't get around our head is, well, the kike will more than likely be able to access something in this profile if it wants to, okay? So what we're trying to say is that this poor little plant here, if this kike's pulling it all out, how is it meant to access anything? So by adding some at sowing with the drill row or pre-dressing some, the hypothesis was behind it was to say, who cares if we grow a little bit of kike? In theory, we should be trying to aim to get that the best establishment as possible, okay? And that's what we wanted. So this was just to prove that point. So here we've got your 50, 90 and 180 kilos of nitrogen on the Kikuyu, okay? And then this is the pre-application. So these ones that are light blue in the middle had nitrogen a week after sowing, okay? So this is our first cut of ryegrass where we've applied 30 kilos of N or 60, and then there's 30 and 60, 30 and 60, okay? We've got a better first cut of our ryegrass. And it'd be nice if you had the, that's dry matter there, isn't it?
Yeah, the dry.
So you got 1,000 kilos, well, almost 1,000 kilos there. So you're getting 800 kilos better off. What's that worth across your farm in your first grazing, when things are a bit tight, you know, you're coming off your Kikuyu, it's slowing down. We want to get that quality feed going into autumn. It makes sense. What we wanted to also point out here is we've actually got a residual again. So by applying the nitrogen on our Kikuyu, okay, at the higher rates, you can see here where there's no N, no N, no N, they're still being higher than these fellas down here where they put no N on their Kikuyu. So the nitrogen, even if you didn't put it on at sowing, has definitely carried across to add some growth into your ryegrass. Follow that?
No.
right?
Let's go back one.
So we've applied.
What I want to know is, so basically, I mean, what's the formula of your starter compared to N? Yeah,
Yep.
because you're putting, what's...
You're probably putting somewhere between 15 and 20 kilos on.
Yeah, the starter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, and we're talking about just putting N on
30, 60.
at sowing, or we're now talking about putting N on prior to sowing, so you've got
this-
the residual through.
Yeah, well, this is on your Kikuyu. So if you're applying nitrogen to your Kikuyu and it's at good rates, we're saying you do get a carry across to the ryegrass, but we are also saying by adding more, right, you're getting a better first grazing.
So, keeping the concept, and we'll probably talk about that as well with using starter and why we believe it's beneficial. But this is more so a top dress of nitrogen soon after the plant's coming out of the ground. Okay, so it gets up, it's got roots in that first couple of centimetres, and we're just making sure it's got a feed.
It would have been nice to see a starter, in this as well to see what that done, but they didn't do that. We just wanted to look at, we didn't want to look at phosphorus and all this other stuff. We just want to look at the nitrogen response, the effect of the nitrogen in the Kikuyu, and the effect of the nitrogen on the first grazing of ryegrass. Just all I want to point out here is this is on one farm within a week, and he's sort of got pastures like this, which he's recognised getting out of control, going too stemmy, starting to grow a lot of dead material. Right, he hasn't been able to get on those paddocks. These ones down here, he started to mulch. Okay, so what's that pivot?
That's here.
Oh, right. Yep. So it's been mulched down here, and then he's got really good quality feed coming back. Okay, so the difference between building up thatch, growing a lot of dead material, not being able to get a ryegrass to establish, compared to dealing with it, coming back, high production again. And he's going to be able to sow into that and get a reasonably good establishment.